What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another college sports show here on the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel. She is Abby Schnable. I am Noah Hiles. And Abby, 1 month from today, we'll be hearing that CBS music, that da-da-da-da-da-da-da. The teams will be done in Dayton. I mean, that's technically when the tournament starts, right? That's the first four, but the big day, the day that every college basketball fan looks forward to, when the action starts at noon and it ends at around 1 a.m. and it's nonstop fun the entire day for 2 straight days.
2 straight days.
That's 1 month from today, which is also my birthday, March 16th. And what a birthday present.
The big 28,
Yeah,
too.
the big 20, the Marshall Falk year, they call it. But enough about me, more about March Madness, Abby. As we are less than a month away from Selection Sunday, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty. We're really seeing what this field is going to kind of look like. There's obviously a lot in play as far as bubble teams, as there is every year, but a lot of programs are getting a solid idea of what type of seeding, what type of matchups they can look forward to if their season stays on course. Now, of course, if it plummets, it could change. It could also change if it gets better. But we're going to take a look at the ACC, a very controversial conference this entire season, the undervalued conference, the just because Duke and North Carolina aren't winning, this conference sucks conference, essentially, is how a lot of the people nationally view things in the Atlantic coast. I personally still think this is a really good league. I think this is a league that has more than a few teams that are capable of reaching at least the Sweet 16, and it will probably have at least one team in the Final Four, as it seems to do every single year. Now, it might not be the teams that we normally see make the Final Four from the ACC, but what says you? Do you think the ACC is really as bad as other people seem to think it is this year, or is it just, underappreciated?
First of all, cannot wait for that Thursday and Friday. My mom used to call us off of school, and we would get to just watch basketball all day Thursday and Friday, like 4 TVs. Well, at the time, it was only like 2 TVs, but now in the Schnable house, it's 4 TVs, all the games
on your success as a family. Holy cow, 4 TVs.
No, we're all just addicted to television and sports. It's fine. Yeah, no, so I've had the privilege of getting to cover 3, some could argue 5 different leagues this season. Big 10, Big 12, ACC, and then I've dabbled in the A10 and the Horizon League.
Horizon League, yes.
Good old Horizon League. And so, I honestly don't think the ACC is as bad as everyone is saying, because, you made a good point, are people saying it's bad because North Carolina and Duke aren't winning? I think so. But when you look at those top teams, I think Virginia, Miami, NC State, Pitt, this isn't necessarily the rankings. I did not write the rankings. These are just, like, in my mind, the top 4 teams. And I just think that those 4 teams, and even the teams below them, are solid teams, arguably better than other conferences. I think it's easy to say that the Big 12 right now is probably the best basketball conference this season. Yeah. I think the Big 10 is having a down year. I don't know. I haven't followed the ACC long enough to be like, is it a down year? But it's just very much the 2 big teams that everyone thinks of when they think of the ACC aren't doing well, so it's considered a down year, which I don't think is fair to some of these other teams that are doing really, really well. And just in general, like, it's a good league, whether UNC and Duke are doing good or bad. There's so many great teams, so many talented players, and I'm excited to see where they land in bracketology, where they land in the end of the conference rankings. It's just going to be a crazy finish, and I can't believe we're almost there.
Yeah, so I want to break it down real quick. Right now, how many teams? And we're going to go into the categories, but just a short answer. How many teams right now in the ACC do you see making the field of 68?
4 or 5. 5 or 6, probably.
Okay.
5 or 6.
All right. I think I'm a little more generous. I think we're going to get 7.
Okay.
I think we'll get 7. And possibly 8. So let's break it down. I'll start with, we have 4 categories. We have locks. We have they'll be in. we have bubble, and then we have lots of work to do. All right. So
and it's worth noting that Noah and he has 4 categories. I
Abby,
had 3
Abby has
categories.
3 categories, and they all kind of fall into it.
Oh,
But we can just you know what, we'll just say 3 categories being the bubble,
okay.
being yeah.
I
So
just
locks,
I
they'll
just
be in, and then the bubble, and then we'll rank the bubble as far as legitimacy.
I
There.
just feel like the work to do category and the bubble category at this point in the season overlap. Like it is
Right.
the
So all
same.
right, we'll do 3 categories then. Look, compromise. That's what we're doing here.
Okay.
All
So
right.
so I think we should start with tournament locks. You say a team and then we talk about it. I say a team. We
Cool.
talk about it so that
All
we
right.
can
I think the top tournament lock is of course Virginia.
absolutely.
Where everyone talks about, oh, there's not a dominant team in this conference. I would be hard pressed to say, find me a team that's more like Houston than Virginia. They're the same team in many, many ways. And Virginia, you can make an argument, while they lost head to head to Houston, Virginia is just as good, if not better, I think, if they were to play again. And everyone views Houston, I think they're second best as far as Vegas odds go to win the tournament this year. They're going to be a 1 seed more than likely. And so if Virginia is so comparable to Houston, then I don't know how the ACC doesn't have that big powerhouse type team, because this is a team that won a national championship less than 4 years ago, and it's got a great head coach. It's coming from a power conference, and it's played a really tough schedule. So, yeah, I think Virginia is the number 1 lock in the ACC. I'm sure you'd have to agree with that.
Yeah, they're my number 1 lock. I mean, when you look at it, they're the only ACC team ranked in the top 30 in KenPom. Their solid wins, Baylor, Illinois, NC State, all pretty much solidified as tournament teams at this point, some could argue. And then this is hard to do, but they're ranked among the top 25 in both offensive and defensive efficiency. They're just a very well-rounded team that I'd be absolutely shocked if something happened for them to not get in the tournament. Which leads me to the next lock is I think Miami's a lock.
Yep.
I think they've just had some really good victories, especially within the ACC. Virginia, Clemson, when Clemson was pretty hot. You'll notice Clemson later in my list, at least. They're 9th in adjusted offensive efficiency. And this is the stat that I keep coming back to, is there's 4 players averaging at least 13 points per game, which is just absolutely insane. They've got that backcourt duo of Wong and Miller, who are both averaging 14 or 15 and 16 points respectively, and then rebounding. And it's just a dominant team that, even though, yes, we've seen them lose, but I don't feel like they have had a really bad loss this season.
Yeah.
And I just think that they're a very solid team, and again, would be shocked if something happened.
Yeah, I think Miami's probably Pitt's toughest matchup, obviously in the regular season, but looking at the ACC tournament, I think that's probably the team that has the best chance to beat the Panthers, both in the regular season and in the ACC tournament. I think Miami is probably the number 1 Final Four candidate from the ACC this year. And I wouldn't put the Panthers or Virginia too far behind that. I think Virginia is still a better Final Four candidate than Pitt. But just the way Miami's built, like what you mentioned, with the guard play, just that veteran backcourt experience, the fact that, I mean, they've been there before. They've made deep tournament runs. And when I consider a lock a month before March Madness, it means this team could lose out and still get in. And Virginia and Miami are really the only 2 teams in the ACC who fit that criteria right now, because they both have 20-plus wins. They've both been ranked for pretty much the entire season. And let's face it, they hold a bit more national clout and reputation based upon their recent success compared to others. So we'll get into the next category, they'll be in, they'll be fine, whatever we want to label it. And I have 3 teams in this. How many do you have? We don't have to list them out. You have how many?
2.
You have 2. Okay, so I'm assuming yours are Pitt and NC State?
Yep.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Pitt, we talk about it nauseum. Obviously, it's the main team we cover here. The Panthers are going to be fine. I'll just say that. In order for them to miss the tournament at this point in the year, things have to go drastically wrong. Now, the caveat to that is they have opportunities for things to go drastically wrong. If they lose Saturday in Blacksburg, it's not that big of a deal. But the other games on their schedule, the home game against Georgia Tech, Syracuse at home, they're 2 games next week, and then the road game at Notre Dame. If they lose 2 of those 3, now we're getting into a little bit of muddy waters here. And you put pressure on yourself to win at Miami at the end of the year and maybe have to win a game in the ACC tournament. I think if Pitt can finish these last 5 games, even just 3-2, it's not going to need to do anything in the ACC tournament to get in. It's about wanting to win all of these games so it can get a better seed in the national tournament. But Pitt should be fine. And I think the same thing applies to NC State. I think whatever Pitt gets seed-wise nationally, we're going to see NC State probably get the exact same thing. I think they're going to be viewed pretty much as a pair because they play a similar brand of basketball. Their tournament resumes are very similar. Pitt won head-to-head in early December. But overall, I mean, I think these 2 teams are going to be viewed as kind of like a 1A, 1B as far as 7 through 10 seeding.
Yeah, the only real key difference between the team is, between the 2 teams is that Pitt has 2 losses to Florida State and Vanderbilt, and NC State doesn't really have a loss to any non-tournament teams except for, and this is why I wrote potential non-tournament teams, is they lost to UNC. And there's a chance UNC doesn't get into the tournament, which is weird to think about. But NC State has a better resume when you look at it from that aspect, just because Pitt does have those 2 losses against those teams that are not going to make it. But they do have those big wins against Virginia, Miami. Sweeping UNC is huge. And then if they could go out on the road, beat Virginia Tech or beat Miami, that would be huge and really get them up in the bracket even more. And like we said, though, I think both of these teams are pretty safe. It would take some really crazy things for them to fall out, which has happened. But I think they're pretty safe.
Yeah, and I'm going to add one more into this pretty safe category, and I'm going to say Duke. And while Duke has been unimpressive as far as what that roster construction should generate, I mean, you look there, the talent they have, especially down low. Jeremy Roach is a really good player at the point. I understand they've made a coaching change and everything, but it's still Duke. It's still pulling together a really, really talented group of players year in and year out. And for that reason, I just think the Blue Devils, it might not be pretty how they get in, but they're going to gain. Worst case scenario for Duke, I think they're a Dayton team. And there's just no way if Duke is up for consideration for one of those Finals 4 spots, it doesn't get in. There's just no way. Because North Carolina, which we're going to talk about soon, is in a bit of a different scenario because Duke hasn't been nearly as disappointing this year as North Carolina. The expectation for North Carolina was this is going to be by far and away the best basketball team in the country this season. And it hasn't been that. Duke was expected to be kind of what a Miami is this year. And it's been a little bit of a step down from that. But it still has a decent resume. It has some strong wins. And I think it has a team that's actually built well to compete in the ACC tournament. I think it's going to get another big win on the road in Chapel Hill here soon. Or did they play in Chapel Hill the first time? I don't know. Sure. It's going to sweep North Carolina, which will help its resume regardless. And I think the Blue Devils are maybe not as comfortable as Pitt at NC State, but I think their brand recognition and just they have a lot going for them that will allow for them to probably be safe as well. I would include them in that category. And I think, is it safe to say those are the 5 teams that when I asked you, hey, 5 teams are making the NCAA, or how many teams are making the NCAA tournament? You said 5 originally, then you upped it to 6. Duke, was that 15 for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I didn't have them in my are likely going to be. I went back and forth on this because you make really good points. They also have the advantage of what I have termed the blue blood bias.
Yeah.
And that people are going to want to put them in. But here's why I bumped them down and I had them in the work to do / bubble category is, they haven't won back-to-back games. They've only won back-to-back games twice since mid-December, and that's not something you want to see in a tournament team. You want to see a team that can put together some solid wins, and they really haven't. And then when you look at their quad when you break down the quads, they're 14-1 and 2-3-4, which is fantastic. That's really something you need to have. But in quad one, they're only 3-7, which isn't a great number. And I know that the selection committee really, really looks at that. But I think when you compare their quad one to, say, a different bubble team, because they have that notoriety, they're likely to get in a little bit more. They were at the top of my work to do / bubble list. I just don't know how much that bias is going to carry when the Blue Bloods kind of, as a whole this season, except for maybe Indiana and UCLA, are kind of not doing great. And
No.
so maybe Duke is able to edge in because they are doing better than UNC, Kentucky. I don't know. I think if I had to put it, it's NC State and Pitt, and then like Duke down here on their chances for me. But yeah. And then when you look at the next teams, like the work
I think, when just to transition here, the next two teams on this bubble, I think you could pair similar to Pitt and NC State, right?
Mhm.
Where these two teams from Clemson's in South Carolina, so from neighboring states, but they're in a very similar pair as well, and that's who.
Well, I'm kind of wondering if ours are going to be different because Clemson's definitely like my number one.
Really?
Hmm.
Okay.
But well, now I'm curious because I have Wake Forest and UNC
Wow.
as my
Okay.
last ones. I didn't necessarily rank them, but Clemson is definitely my one, and I don't know. I'm just not a fan of UNC this year. And so, just starting in Clemson, an 18-4 start is just absolutely huge. They have a key win over a ranked Duke, but they have had 3 straight losses. Like there's 3 straight losses. Boston College, not a good loss to have. Miami and UNC was by 20 points, if I'm not mistaken. And there goes Finley in the background with the squeaker toy. But they do have key wins they have key games, good opportunities coming up against NC State and Virginia. And I feel like those are great opportunities for them to really like solidify that, yes, I am a tournament team. And I think Clemson is of these last 3 teams that I have written down. I think Clemson is the most likely to get in between Clemson, Wake Forest, and UNC. I'm going to pivot to you because I feel like you're going to say UNC, and I don't know. I'm kind of leaning more Wake Forest, but at the same time, UNC has the bias. So take it away.
Yeah, I think the bias matters. When we're talking about people, I mean, we've seen it. Anytime a blue blood is on that fringe to make Dayton, they always seem to get in. They very rarely leave a blue blood out of the bubble. And it's just the reality of the situation. I mean, you look, Syracuse has had numerous times where it gets in as an 11 seed over a 12 seed, or a 12 seed over a mid-major that probably had a more deserving resume. It happened with UCLA a couple years ago when the Bruins were on the bubble, and it ended in a Final Four run. So, I mean, they justified that. But I think North Carolina is going to get that same benefit of the doubt. And you can point to its resume, and there are tons of flaws. Don't get me wrong. This has been probably one of the most disappointing college basketball teams in recent history of the sport. It will be, I think, the first ever preseason top-ranked team in the country to miss the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
If that does happen. But I just don't see it happening. First off, I think the Tar Heels have some opportunities. They play Sunday against NC State. They have Virginia. They have Duke. Those are 3 huge win opportunities right there. Now, if they go 0-3 there, they might be in big trouble. But for them to have those 3 big games, they're going to be in front of a national audience. As I've said before, people are kind of watching Pitt, waiting for it to fall apart. People are still watching this North Carolina team, waiting for it to come together. They see that starting 5 with 4 of those guys who were starters last year in the NCAA final. They return their 6th man as well. They add in a guy like Pete Nance. And granted, they don't have any depth whatsoever. And there's times where the team doesn't play well together. And maybe that Final Four run was a fluke last year. Maybe they just kind of clicked at the right time, and their coaching staff isn't on the same page, and this really just isn't working, and we just were sold fool's gold. But nonetheless, I still think that North Carolina, with the hype, with the talent, and with the opportunities that it has, it's going to find its way in. It's going to be a Dayton team, And I think that because of that, and I think Clemson serves to be the team that gets hurt most out of this, where they're going to be in a similar spot. And regardless of resume, when they're making choices, they're going to say, okay, but who's really a better team for this event, Clemson or North Carolina? That's
Yeah,
why I put them in a similar spot where Clemson has had the better season this year, but very few people view Clemson as a better team than North Carolina. So I think that kind of evens the playing field and puts them as the top two bubble teams in the ACC. As
yeah.
far as Wake Forest, I think they're in a different conversation.
When I look at UNC, they're 0-9 in quad one wins, and that's just an awful, awful quad one record that I have a hard time like sitting here justifying that they should be in over, say, a Clemson or any other teams that are really on the bubble, because that's an awful, awful Q1 record, and that's not on paper, because you do look at the talent and it looks like they should be a really good team. But they haven't shown anything to prove that they're going to be successful in the NCAA tournament. When you look at this most recent NCAA, or this season, I should say, when you look at this most recent top 25 poll, there's not a single team of those 25 teams that North Carolina has beat.
Yeah.
And I just don't know if they're in this conversation if they weren't picked to be preseason number one. And I think that sucks, like you said, for Clemson, arguably for a Wake Forest or whoever on the bubble. It just sucks that that's in the back of everyone's heads is, oh, well, they were supposed to be. And here's my thing is they're not. Why are we giving them this thing when this season they haven't shown that they're able to compete to that level of play that some of these other teams have shown? And so that's why I have them. I agree with Wake Forest kind of being in below Clemson and UNC. I just, I'm a sucker for Tyree Appleby. I just think he's a phenomenal player. And I just hate coming from a mid-major school. I hate this high major, not that Wake Forest is a mid-major, but I hate that the high major bias and the blue blood bias is like going to be the reason that North Carolina is going to get in, because I just don't think that they've really shown this season that they should be. And I wouldn't be surprised if, like you said, they're in. And I don't really know, they have to capitalize on those those three big games in order for me to be like, yeah, okay, they deserve it.
Yeah. Or, I mean, a tournament run would also help the Tar Heels. As far as Wake Forest goes, we're going to know Wake Forest's answer a week from today. If you look, they have two big games. Their next two games, they're on the road at Miami and on the road at NC State.
Mm-hmm.
Now, those could reshape their entire season. If they win back-to-back games against those two teams, Wake Forest asserts itself. It leaps North Carolina and Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like in Duke territory where this team's probably going to get in now.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it goes 0-2 there, you look at the remaining three on its schedule. It plays Notre Dame, Boston College at home, and ends on the road at Syracuse. I don't think that's enough juice where you're looking at you probably have to win the ACC tournament to get in at that point. Because just back-to-back losses at any point in this season will do Wake Forest in, and losing back-to-back to those two ranked opponents, that's a season ender, I think. But depending on how Wake Forest does in those next two games, I think we'll know about really their fate as a whole. They're listed right now as a first four out on CBS, and they're considered on ESPN's latest bracketology, which means they're not even in the next four out, which means there's like 8 teams at least ahead of them as far as Joe Lunardi is concerned. Abby, who's one other team in the ACC that you think if everything goes right, maybe they have a shot?
So we talked about all of the 8 teams I wrote down, but I think the safe answer is probably Syracuse.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like they've put together enough of a resume that if they can go on a little bit of run, get hot at the right time, they have a chance of slipping in. Like I think they're a team that could really like capitalize on a ACC tournament run, just because there are a good amount of teams that feel pretty safe. And so maybe they're holding back a little bit to save their juice for the NCAA tournament. And that's where Syracuse can really come in and try and capitalize on that. And I feel like they're arguably my biggest underdog for the ACC tournament. They haven't really shown that much for me to say, yeah, they're going to win the ACC tournament. But at the same time, they have the most to gain from an ACC tournament run. Sure, everyone's going to benefit from that, but at this point, they're just far enough out that I don't see them being an at-large team. But an ACC tournament run, going to the finals, depending on what the selection committee's feeling, and even winning it is really going to help Syracuse out. I think that's the team you had as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about opportunities. Here are Syracuse's final 5 games. Home Saturday against Duke. On the road that following Wednesday at Syracuse. Next weekend, they travel to Pittsburgh. Then they get an easy home game against Georgia Tech. And then they wrap up at home against Wake Forest. So you're looking at 2 teams on the bubble that you can knock off. And then 2 teams just above the bubble with Duke and Pittsburgh, who are tournament teams right now. So 4 of your final 5 games are against teams that are ahead of you in the conference standings, against teams that are fighting in their own right to still build their tournament resume. And if you can win 4 of those final 5 games, so you allow yourself to lose. Probably toughest matchups would be either on the road at Clemson or coming here to Pittsburgh. Duke, obviously, at home on a Saturday is going to be a tough one as well. But if they go 4-5 there, they finish the regular season with 20 wins. They have some statement victories, including one earlier this week at home, I believe, against NC State, which was a really, really impressive win. Got to watch the end of that one. This team has showed it's able to play well in March before. And like I just mentioned, these marquee programs always get the bubble benefit of the doubt, the blue blood benefit or bias or whatever you want to call it. Syracuse isn't necessarily a blue blood, but no team has benefited more from this field going from 64 to 68 teams than Syracuse. If you look, I mean, a lot of their runs, they're sneaking in there, and then they play teams that aren't used to or familiar with that 2-3 zone and really how to attack it, and they just chomp down on these mismatches, and they get to the Sweet 16. It's this thing we've seen time and time again. I wouldn't be. I guess I would be a little surprised, but there are more things that could happen that would shock me than Syracuse. I think Syracuse is in a decent spot for considering how things have gone this year. For all of that to take place and then to have the opportunities that they still do, I would be encouraged if you're the Orange, because they're not completely dead yet. Where I think someone like a Virginia Tech, who at one point in time was in the mix, is now all but they're probably going to have to win it all in order for them to get in. But Syracuse, I think if it can go 4-5 to close out the regular season and do well and probably they don't have to win the ACC tournament, but if it gets to the final, because that would include probably a win over a Pitt, a Miami, a Virginia, a Duke, again, someone along those lines, that might be enough. Mm-hmm. So that's a team I definitely have my eye on.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
So I think that's all we need to cover today. I think we did a really good job of breaking down the ACC there. Let us know in the comments. I mean, if there's someone else that you feel, I mean, looking through here, I mean, Boston College, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, Louisville, Virginia Tech. Yeah, like those teams are done. But I mean, I do think that, I don't know, because it's just, you want to think that this could be a 7 or 8 team league. But then when you look at the teams that we're talking about to be that 6th or 7th team, we're part of our argument is, well, it's Syracuse. Well, it's North Carolina. Well, it's Duke. They're going to get the benefit of the doubt. So does that make it a good league, or does it make it a league that has a few good teams and then a few programs with rich traditions? I don't know.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting come Selection Sunday, and even before that, to see how things kind of shake out as we go, because I think there could be some shuffling. I don't see those 4 teams that we first talked about, Virginia, Miami, NC State, and Pitt, really moving around. But one game could be the difference between Duke being a safe bet and Duke being out. And that's what's crazy about this time of year, is everything is such high stakes. and everyone wants to be one of those 68, probably really more of those 64 teams to keep their season alive. And it's going to be a fun ride.
It sure will be. And we'll have it all covered. Keep reading our coverage at post-gazette.com. You can keep tuning into the YouTube channel where we'll have tons of content for Steelers, Penguins, Pirates, all colleges. We got it all here. Hit that subscribe all button if you haven't already, and keep tuning in. We'll see you again here on the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel. Take care.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down in the description.